All right, got the recording going there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin with today's presentation. All right, so again, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Trauma and Stress, Behavioral Signs and Symptoms. This webinar is brought to you by our colleagues at the Supporting Heroes in Mental Health Foundation training through the Innocent Justice Foundation. And please note that their information are located here on this slide. For those joining us today, please note that our webinar is indeed being recorded at this time and will be published at a later time on our YouTube page. If you'd like to access archived videos on our YouTube page, you may do so by clicking the link here. If you'd like to receive any transcript or any supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of important documents and resources related to today's webinar, you may do so by locating the Handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here you will find the webinar PowerPoint and FAQ and other documents that will help address any technical related questions. Simply click on the name of the file and then click the download button. Throughout today's presentations, you will have a chance to submit your question. You may do so by simply submitting your question into the chat pod as they arise. Simply type your question and then hit enter or click the send button that is indicated by the bubble icon. Now, let's help us count. If you're viewing today by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, meaning it's yourself and other individuals or more than one person that is with you, please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. So if I am viewing, say, with my mom, I will type in the letter 1 because I'm counting my mom. So that's just an example. Type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today, not including yourself. And I'll give folks just a couple of seconds to do that. And thank you all. Now, please note that you all will receive an automated email that will contain a certificate of attendance. Note that this certificate will only be provided to those who are signed in. If you would like to receive a certificate for any additional individual that is viewing the webinar with you today, that in that group, please be sure to download the group validation form, complete the form, and then send it to us. On that form, you will only need to add in the additional person. So if my mother was joining me for today's webinar, I will complete that form and say, please provide a certificate for my mom. And you can submit that to the OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov. Now, that being said, I'd like to turn over today's presentation to our moderator, Ms. Beth Medina. Beth, take it away.
Thanks so much, William. Hi, everyone. So great to see such a terrific cross-section from across the country. So I welcome you all. Just as a little bit of background, the Innocent Justice Foundation holds a grant from OJJDP for our SHIFT program. We are the training and technical assistance provider for officer wellness for ICAC teams across the country. We also do trainings for other professionals, but we're going to be talking today is part of our series on trauma and traumatic stress. We train all across the country to educate people about trauma, vicarious trauma, traumatic stress, and to provide tools and techniques to mitigate the negative effects from chronic exposure to trauma. So today is the fifth out of 6 in a series where we're discussing trauma effects across the signs and symptoms and the effects across 5 domains. We talk about this often in our training class. And today we're going to be talking about the behavioral signs and symptoms. We always train with one mental health professional and one law enforcement professional, and they are with us today, and they'll introduce themselves. So please take an opportunity to take a look at our website or use the links from NTTAC to see the other webinars in the series if you have not had an opportunity to attend those. Thanks so much for being here, and I am always available for questions, and you can email me at my contact information at the end of this. So I will turn it over to our wonderful trainers who are going to just do, I know, a great job for you today. Thanks so much.
Anthony, would you like to go?
Ladies first.
Okay. So my name is Carol Brusca. I am actually the embedded mental health provider for Anthony's New Mexico ICAC. So whatever Anthony says goes. I love working with Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force members because the work that they do is so incredible, trying to help children and save children. So I really enjoy the having the ability to work with ICAC. But I also work with others across the spectrum. I work with therapists. I work with child advocacy centers. I work with other types of law enforcement. So when we're talking today, we might talk from an ICAC perspective, but all of these things can be used no matter what your job title is, no matter what your job area is. These are signs and symptoms that are from the behavioral standpoint, and so consequently, we're going to be talking about tools and techniques, and these will all be able to be used across the board no matter what your job title is. I've been doing this work for Innocent Justice for about 5 or 6 years now, and I think probably 6 or 7 with Anthony. I feel so honored that I'm able to present today and looking forward to hearing from all of you and hopefully giving you some new information that you haven't had in the past. Go ahead, Anthony.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony May. I'm the Special Agent in Charge and the Commander of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the Human Trafficking Task Force for the Office of the New Mexico Attorney General. I'm also a trainer with the Innocent Justice Foundation. I've been training with them for about probably a little over 8 years. The time has just flown by. I've been in law enforcement for over 32 years. I actually retired once already, but I love law enforcement so much that I'm back, and I started the task force. The really unique thing about this training that we're going to be providing you today is that it works for everyone. I've been in law enforcement for as long as I've been. I've had the opportunity to work in many different areas. My last assignment before starting ICAT was violent crimes, sex crimes, child abuse, and domestic violence. And what we'll be talking about today, you can apply that in your field because we all experience vicarious trauma in what we do, and we need to take care of ourselves. As we've seen in the news, it affects us all. Law enforcement has a very high suicide rate, and we want to stop that. You know, we want to put an end to this, and we need to start taking care of ourselves because we can't take care of others if we're not taking care of ourselves. Something about today's material, we'll be talking about the nature of the material. We'll be talking about some things about how vicarious trauma affects us. And we'll break that down, of course, and some of the things that we may be experiencing. So understand that doing that might invoke some powerful emotions and maybe invoke some prior trauma that you experienced personally or you're part of in your job every day. Keep in mind that this is to create a safe environment. Even though we're virtual, we're always available for you. So if there's something you need to discuss after today, you're always welcome to reach out to Carol, Beth, or myself if we can help you with anything. Let's keep in mind that we need to respect others' experiences. So if something comes up in the chat box, we'll try to address that. Beth, we're fortunate to have Beth with us, our CEO. She'll be able to answer some of the chats and help facilitate some of the discussions as well. But we want you to feel comfortable during our presentation today, and we want you to get a lot out of it. Again, feel free to ask questions, and we're excited you're here. So thanks for being here.
So the objectives that we're going to cover today, like Beth said, this is part of a series of training. So today our focus will be on the behavioral signs and symptoms. But what we're going to do first is we're going to explain what secondary trauma and traumatic stress are, in case you are not familiar with that. Or even if you have heard those terms before, we're going to talk about what they are so that we're all on the same page. We're going to review how the body responds to trauma and stress. And again, we're going to talk about the behavioral signs and symptoms of traumatic stress and secondary stress. And then we're going to finish up by discussing resilience and providing tools and techniques. So by the end of the day, by the end of this webinar, hopefully you will know what secondary trauma and traumatic stress are, how it impacts your body, how from a behavioral standpoint people respond, and then what kind of things you can do to protect yourself and prevent further trauma. And what we do want to explain, like Beth said from the beginning, that we are funded through the ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children, through the OJJDP for ICAC. So our shift classes are designed to support ICAC and the affiliates. And so that's what nationally when we're training, we go through, meet with law enforcement agencies across the country. But today, obviously, there's going to be some people that aren't part of ICAC, and so we will be giving you the same kind of tools and techniques, but they can be used across the board. So exposure to child sexual abuse material can have long-term negative impact on professionals, and wellness support is vital. So what we want you to know is anyone who is exposed to child sexual abuse material, whether you're from a CAC, again, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a different type of law enforcement, whether you're ICAC, everyone that's in the job where you are exposed to others' traumas can be impacted. So hopefully we'll give you some suggestions today to help you out. So what is secondary trauma? And secondary trauma is trauma that occurs that does not happen directly to you, but it's trauma that you witness. So secondary trauma can be something where I saw a car accident and that impacted me. Secondary trauma can be something like I was looking at materials that were difficult for me to see. And I wasn't involved in the actual trauma, but it impacted me nonetheless. So what happens is when that happens to us, our brain goes into fight, flight, or freeze. The reptilian part of our brain, which is instinctual and doesn't have a logical side to it, takes over, and the brain decides whether we can fight our way out of this instance, whether we can run away, or whether there's nothing we can do and we become overwhelmed and we freeze. So what we want you to take away from this is every time you witness someone else's trauma, whether it's through seeing it, through hearing about it, through hearing it secondhand from someone else, every time you witness someone else's trauma, you can potentially be traumatized yourself, because your brain doesn't have the understanding that the trauma is not happening to you, and it wants to protect you in a life or death situation, so it will either put you into fight, flight, or freeze. When you go into fight, flight, or freeze, you're going to have an increase in oxytocin first to motivate you. You're going to have an increase in cortisol. Then you're going to be able to do what you need to do to get out of the situation that your brain feels is deadly. So I'm sure that there's been times when you've been frightened or traumatized or heard something that was very traumatic and you have experienced this. So when we're talking about secondary trauma, that's what we are talking about, referring to. So through this whole series, when people are traumatized, there can be different domains to consider. So when you experience something traumatic, and if you are possibly vicariously traumatized or experiencing secondary trauma, you can experience on a physical, a cognitive or intellectual, emotional or relationship, relational, behavioral, or worldview spiritual level. So for instance, if it was a physical level, I might have physical symptoms. If it was cognitive, then it might be something like I was confused. Emotionally, I might feel very, have lots of mood swings and be very tearful. So, and so on and so on. And what we want you to understand is today the focus on behavioral. If you would like to go back to see the previous webinars on physical, cognitive, intellectual, and emotional, those are available as well. And our next, last of the series coming up will be worldview and spiritual. So the symptoms of chronic exposure, and when we're talking about chronic exposure, what we're talking about is if you are continually exposed to the trauma of someone else, then over time, that can impact you. Now, if you have a normal response, then you can see something traumatic or you can hear something traumatic, whatever the case may be, but the image of that or the sound of that doesn't stick with you and it doesn't come back into your brain. So for instance, if I, again, if I witnessed a car accident and I wasn't involved, I didn't know anybody, if I witnessed this car accident and then for the rest of the day I was kind of thinking about it, it popped in and out of my head, or maybe I could, it replayed over in my head again and again and again. But then by the end of the day, I was able to kind of process that and put it away. That would be a normal response. A warning sign might be that intermittently for the next week, I would have visualizations of that car accident again, or maybe it would pop up when I was in traffic. A trouble indicator would be if it's persistent and it doesn't ever go away. So I watched something that happened, and I can't get it out of my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see the car accident happening again. Then it interrupts every bit of my day. So I'm trying to have a conversation with my friend, and I can't get the picture out of my head. Maybe I'm hearing the sounds of the car accident, whatever the case might be. And this can happen if you are chronically exposed, meaning if you're exposed over and over again, this could happen to you. So the reason that we talk about this is so that you will know when you experience trauma vicariously, if it's going to stick with you over time, then you might want to get some support around that if none of the tools and techniques that we give you today help. So this is so that you will remember to pay attention to what's going on with you and know that that if this does happen, it's not like you're out of control or you're losing it or there's something you're going to be stuck forever. This is one of the things that our brain does. And the reason that our brain makes these things come back in, so the reason that my brain might make me think about the car accident again or maybe might make me have flashbacks is because it's trying to figure out how to process that and what to do with that information so that if I ever need to access it again, it will be available and I won't get in the situation again. So it's a protective mechanism that your brain uses, but if you're constantly being impacted by images of whatever it was that you witnessed, that can be very, very disruptive to normal life. So even though it's a good thing that it happens, it can be very disruptive and it can cause problems because it impacts your ability to have quality of life.
Okay, so some of the compounding factors that would cause some of this, maybe insufficient resources for your team. As we discussed earlier, this could apply to anyone. We have ICAC teams, Internet Crimes Against Children teams. However, this could apply to any of your teams. Insufficient resources is definitely part of that. Many of our cases are never investigated. So we're seeing that now, especially with what the current environment that we're in. I mean, I personally, with my teams, when we went into this back in March, our TIPs increased to almost 200%. And I know for a fact that we won't get to some of these cases because the increase of TIPs. So again, triaging these cases and who's going to be the victim. And working in ICAC cases, many times we think, well, it's that one case where we triage and it's only one image and we push it aside, and is that going to be the hands-on? And again, just triaging those cases and making the right decisions. And we're all in that position. We have our own caseload. You don't have to be a supervisor to be feeling this. And then, of course, limiting the amount of help that can be given. Unfortunately, with some of the isolation that we're dealing with now throughout the country, that we are working from home, we may start feeling isolated. Again, that's one of our compounding factors, that we're feeling some of that pressure. Definitely a lack of understanding from the general public about the work that we do. And as it's stated here in Internet Crimes Against Children, understanding exactly what we do, understanding that we work with children that are being exploited. But as we all know, that sometimes the public's questioning pretty much any decision that's made, and sometimes they feel it's unjust and what the final outcome is. So understand the responsibility to protect the community from possible reoffenses. So some of the things that we deal with firsthand is our responsibility, making sure it doesn't occur. I mean, meeting with our probation officer folks, it's something that they have to deal with daily with their clients and their caseload, and it's something that person they're monitoring going to reoffend. The direct and daily contact with victims and or offenders. Again, working with that victim, talking to them about what took place, assuring them that we can help them. You know, and again, moving from the victim to survivor and continuing working with that survivor and making sure that they're doing fine. And as law enforcement, I depend heavily on my victim advocates and victim services to assist me with that, because it's definitely a stress that we take on. And then, of course, the increased caseload, and the severity of the offenses that we're seeing. And as we all have seen, within the last decade, it seems like the cases are becoming more difficult. Definitely, they're more violent, and it seems like the children are younger. I mean, it's things that we're seeing and hearing about, and that we're part of. Definitely, the severity of offenses has increased, causing an overall aggravated negative effect.
So the focus of today is going to be how this secondary trauma, how vicarious trauma can impact us in our behaviors. So this means what kind of behaviors are changed in us related to our stress. How do we act differently? How do we behave differently when we're stressed as opposed to when we're feeling calm and relaxed? And when you can pay attention to this in your own life, when you notice, wow, that's a behavior that I didn't used to have, and since I've been doing this type of work, or since I've been very stressed, or since I've had to witness so much trauma of someone else, I've changed my behaviors. And so today we're going to talk about that, but we want you to pay attention to, are there any behaviors that you have changed since you've been in a high stress situation, and what are those behaviors?
Okay, great. So our first question, what is a behavioral sign of traumatic stress you've seen yourself or others? And again, as Carol mentioned, think about these behavioral signs. Could it be numbing, just numbing to what's going on around us? Completely shutting down. Maybe risk-taking behavior, maybe excessive drinking or other types of drugs, and driving fast.
And we're seeing some good answers up here now. So there's people that are jumpy, they're fighting, short-tempered.
Awesome.
Yep, yeah, with short-tempered, angry. Those are very, very common. I'm seeing a short fuse. So it sounds like there's quite a few people that are feeling short-tempered, and that's very common. That's very understandable. It's when we're not quite sure how to respond, how to deal with a situation, we can become more aggravated, and oftentimes what happens is we might take that out on those that we care for. So insomnia, maybe because your things are going over and over again in your head, short temper, insomnia. So what I'm seeing across the board here is that there's not much patience, there's a short fuse. So yeah, those are very common experiences. And what we're hoping today is we can give you some tools that will help you to maybe increase your feelings of calm and peace, so that short temper isn't the automatic way to go. And it's not that you're intentionally trying to be short-tempered. It's that we get to the point where we feel like we're pushed into a corner, and when we get there, we kind of lash out. So having to experience other people's trauma on a daily basis can certainly impact our ability to remain calm and feeling collected and feeling patient. So hopefully today we'll be able to help out with that.
And you know, Carol, that being said, that some of those that they listed were actually, we see those on the physical side as well, you know, and we notice that insomnia and the sleeping difficulties and those kind of things are definitely something that on the physical side does affect us. I mean, many of us, we listen as behavioral, but then, you know, on Sunday night before Monday morning, we have problems falling asleep because it's taken a toll. So it's something that I'm glad you listed that on there.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, so what are some of the signs and symptoms aside from what you all brought up today? What we're talking about is what is happening to my responses. So, in what way am I responding differently than I would when I wasn't feeling this level of trauma or stress? So sometimes people they distance themselves from others because they can't predict how they're going to behave around others, so they draw back, so that they're not worried about lashing out and potentially ruining relationships. There can be a low motivation. You just can't get yourself up and going. So it's a matter of trying to get going and you just can't. There's sometimes risk-taking behaviors. That can be one of the things, because people just need the big distraction, and that's something that is common. Substance abuse sometimes happens, so it's a way to distract yourself. So these are the things that happen that impact our relationships with others, and that and how we navigate ourselves throughout our world. So some of the signs and symptoms, like Anthony previously said, you know, numbing, shutting down. Some of the other things that we see from a behavioral standpoint could be something like maybe you have a habit of watching maybe Netflix or something, or maybe you like to go on Amazon, maybe you do gaming, any kind of behaviors that go to the excess. So maybe on a typical afternoon, you come home and you have one drink, but now you're noticing you come home and you have 3 or 4 drinks. Or maybe you used to zone out by going on Amazon and buying one thing, but now you notice you're on there for hours and hours, or any kind of social media in excess. These are all ways of coping. They're just not necessarily very healthy coping. So it's anything that's to the excess. Certainly it's fine to shop online or game online or watch TV, but when it's taking up enough time that it's negatively impacting your life, that's when it becomes an issue that should be dealt with.
Well, and then if you start noticing that you start distancing from others because it becomes too much and it's hard to engage with others, and you find that you're just, again, as Carol mentioned, even just in the binge watching Netflix for 3 days straight and not really engaging with anyone else, it's definitely an indicator that things are starting to affect you.
Okay, so I think we have our next. Anthony, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So, oops, and it's off my screen. So let me see
sorry.
here. No,
so,
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
I got it here. Yeah. What is? I have the slides up too. So, what is something you do to relieve behavioral stress responses? So, what are some of the things that you do to relieve behavioral stress responses? Oh, great answers already.
Yes. And walking, getting out there and exercising, all of that's so important. You guys must have been taking our classes before, because you are on the ball with how you reply. Walking, hiking, dancing, all of those things is a great way to move your body. And when you're moving your body, you're getting some of that cortisol out of your system. You're getting the opportunity to feel better about yourself and your surroundings. And it's a quick, easy way to get more exercise in, which is going to be good overall, as well as it's a great way for you to get rid of that cortisol, give you a new perspective, and help you feel better. Anthony, is there something that you do to relax when you're feeling stressed out from a behavioral standpoint?
Lately, I've been taking the dog in the backyard and running with him and then wearing him out. So I usually outdo him. So that's one of my big ones because, as you know, we're all working from home. So kind of come up with some new ways to deal with things. I used to go for a walk when I was at work. I'd go for a long walk around our building. But the new way of dealing with things is a backyard dog at home.
Great. And I see a couple people here put spend time with family and friends. There's time with friends. That's another fabulous thing to do because, again, it's going to take us out of our own head and help us build community. And we know that resilience, one of the biggest indicators of resilience is being able to have and use our supports. So if you have friends and family or you have friends that you can spend time with, that's a wonderful thing to do to really build that support in place and help your resilience skills. And like Anthony, if you're spending time with your pet or your dog or whatever that might be, that's great for you and your pet. We know that when you spend time, if you haven't had a negative experience with a dog, if you're spending time or there's a dog that walks in the room, just the fact the dog walks in the room, that can actually lower your blood pressure. So there's a lot of things that you all are doing right now that are really great. Singing, I love that because, again, that's going to be making you do some deep breathing, which is going to help get more oxygen to your brain, which is going to help you think more clearly. And it's also getting that, allowing your voice to be heard and making yourself feel better just by the process of singing. So those are the responses that you all are giving are wonderful responses. It sounds like you're really on top of it.
Yeah, I really like the responses.
Yeah. Whoops, we went back. There we go. Okay. So some of the things that you can do to reset, so cultivate positive connections, which is what we talked about, which sounds like several of you are doing already. Making sure that you're connecting with others and not pulling back. And sometimes when you feel like pulling back, because that's a natural inclination for us to do, you can put yourself out there and say, you know, I'm really struggling right now, and I know that it's best for me to be with people, so I'm just going to be along here for the ride. I might not be very interactive, but I know it's great for me to be in a space with other people, so here I am, and I'm needing some support right now. And Anthony, you want to talk about frustration?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep on. I'm losing the screen here for some reason. I'm having some issues with my laptop. Yeah, so definitely sharing your frustrations and worries with trusted people. So talking to your teammates, or definitely talking to family members, talking to your spouse. Maybe sometimes even someone outside your occupation, and talking about some of your frustrations that way. Instead of just, keeping everything inside. And then identifying how stress affects our behaviors. I mean, what is that doing? How is it changing the way I respond and how I interact with people? So look at that. Look how you engage with other folks as well and how that's affecting you. We've talked a lot about the behavioral signs, but think about that. How is that affecting you, and how are you engaging with other folks?
And, I think the last two really are important to keep in mind. So changing behaviors takes time and practice. It's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. If you've ever tried to stop or start something new, you know that many times it's a start, stop before it really becomes a new habit. So if you're choosing a behavior to change after this webinar, remember to have some patience and self-compassion. Don't give up, and know that it might take 6 weeks before it really becomes a habit. I know for me, since COVID happened, I've really seen in my relationships with others and in my conversations with others, many of the things that we're talking about here now, the frustrations and worries, and if you have the ability to share that with others, even if it feels like more of a venting session, because you know that doesn't matter how many people you talk to about your frustration about COVID, it's not going away. Just knowing that there's other people that have your back can make all the difference.
Right, yes. Okay, so thinking about how we can reset our behavioral stress reactions, think about using tools to support changing your behavior, some of the things that you all listed. But think about some of those tools and how you can change. And some of you listed walking, running, doing exercise and things like that. Even though, you know, that on the physical side, but that, of course, our behavior, and that's definitely the way we can change some of the ways we think and how we relax. Have you ever noticed that after you work out, how it clears things up a little bit and how you feel a little more refreshed and relaxed? Recall and celebrate successes, some great successes. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a work success, even though those are amazing. Those are great. Having a wall of, with ICAC, we have a wall of shame, you know, and those predators that we were able to put away. But recall and celebrate those successes in your cases. And again, it doesn't have to just be at work. It can be within your family, but anything that's going to help reduce some of that stress. Identify one good thing that happened in the day. Now, something that I've started to do, and well, it's not started, it's been at least over a year now, is write down on a sticky note one good thing that happened that day and put it on my desk. And then the next morning, I come back to that and think about that great thing that happened that day. Usually there's more than one, but it's something that, think about that. So at the end of the year, you're going to have all these amazing things, this collage of amazing things that happen to you throughout the year. And so recognizing that. Establish a positive communication technique. I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Anthony, and I'll just jump in when you're finished. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say establish positive communication techniques and how you communicate with others, okay? And again, when stress takes us over, the way we communicate could be short and impulsive, and the way we act towards others. So how we establish and how we communicate with others. You know, I would say, you know, sometimes we communicate different with our family than we do with strangers. So we need to practice that. How would you communicate with your stranger? Would you tell a stranger something that you would tell a family member? We want to communicate in a positive way. And then, of course, grounding yourself. And we'll cover a grounding exercise in a moment, but that's really important, to ground yourself.
And when I think, Anthony, when I think of tools that I can use to support changing my behaviors, I always think of, because it's my go-to, I've got my phone with me all the time. What are the apps that I can use to help me change my behaviors? So if I'm thinking I really need to do some more breathing because that settles me, what kind of meditation or breathing apps might I use? If I feel like I want to journal, or recall and write down my successes, I can use, there's apps for that. So we actually have a whole list of apps. If you're interested in getting those, you can email Beth and we can get those out to you. They're also on our webpage, but there's a plethora of every type of app for every single thing you can imagine. If you want to increase your running or your exercise, there's apps for that as well. So just keep that in mind, that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to recreate the wheel, that there is support out there, even with tools to help support your behavior change. So this grounding exercise, go ahead, Anthony, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. That's so on the grounding exercise, and I love this grounding exercise, and we do this, again, we do this in our classrooms, but and so it's great. You can do this at home, and you can do this in wherever you're sitting today. Acknowledge 5 things around you, okay? So look around your room right now. And the great grounding exercise is 5 things around you, and just think about those 5 things, and then acknowledge 4 things that you can touch. 4 things that you can touch. And then think about 3 things that you can hear. And one of my 3 things right now is our dog was barking. And 2 things that you can, a lot of package deliveries. 2 things you can smell, okay? And there's some great things you can do for that as well. Just smelling a lemon or an orange makes a big difference. We actually run a diffuser in our office, in our ICAC suite, that actually puts out the great smell of oranges. And, of course, everybody loves it. And then finally, one thing that you can taste.
So, and all of those are really great things to do that you don't have to do it in any particular order. So even though we have it listed here because these are typically, it's easier to find 5 things around you as opposed to 5 things around that you can taste. You can do this in any order, and you can do this anywhere. Another really great grounding exercise that we use is putting your hand on your heart, because one of the most basic ways to calm ourselves from in utero was to hear the heartbeat of our mother and to feel the heartbeat of our mother. By putting your hand on your heart, that recreates that same sense of calm that you might have felt when you were in utero. Oh, and here's the exercise right here. So again, so you're going to make sure that you put your hand on your heart. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to focus on your heartbeat. You're going to take a deep breath, hold it to 5, and exhale, and then wait for 5 beats, because it's really amazing how that helps. And again, this is something that you can do anywhere. Both of these exercises, the reason that we highlight these is because you can do them everywhere. You don't have to be, it's not going to draw attention to you. You could be in a conference meeting or conference room. You could be driving on the road. Whatever the case might be, it's a way to quickly ground yourself so that you're feeling back in your body. And the reason we want you feeling back in your body is so that you can then be focused in the moment and on what's going on. So it helps you to then be able to be aware of what's going on, notice that maybe what is happening around you, and not be so dragged down by the situation that the vicarious trauma situation that keeps popping up. So another thing that I recommend to everyone is doing some belly breathing. And what belly breathing is all about is making sure that you are getting a full breath. So when we are newborns, this is how we breathe. We breathe very deeply and slowly, and the air gets from the bottom of our belly all the way up. As we experience stressful situations, or difficult situations, traumatic situations, we have a tendency to breathe higher and higher in our chest, as well as breathe more shallowly. So what we want to do is make sure that we can focus on some deep, deep breaths, and this is going to explain to you how to do that. Sit down comfortably, one hand on your belly, deep breath in through your nose, push your hand out, and then breathe out through your lips as if you're whistling. 3 to 10 times, that will be amazingly calming for you.
Okay,
so
and
what
then,
are the benefits?
Oh, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
All right, so communication is a must, and we've kind of touched on that today already. So communicating with your family members, of course, you know, if you had a bad day, maybe having those key words so your spouse understands that you had a bad day, and maybe something to look for. That way, because our family sometimes absorbs some of the things that happens to us during our work day, so definitely communication is vital. Communicating with your team, okay, and working together, setting up that teamwork environment where we're paying attention to each other, and we understand and we can see those indicators, and if someone's struggling or having those issues. And then checking in with each other, definitely. That's a big part of teamwork, is checking in with each other. We have to take care of each other. We're out there taking care of the survivors, and we're out there making a difference in society, but sometimes we miss that. And so looking out for each other is very important. And then, of course, connecting with each other. I mean, this is a great place to do it here with this particular webinar. But within your office, you have folks around you, connecting with them, checking in with them, and communicating with them, and making a better environment for you and them. All right, poll question number 3. What is one new tool or technique you learned today to relieve behavioral stress responses? So again, what is one new tool or technique you learned today to relieve behavioral stress responses?
So it sounds like a lot of people had not heard of the heartbeat or had not heard of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But yeah, this is great. So a lot of people talking about the heartbeat and the breathing and the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things. So it's wonderful that that these are simple techniques that we've been able to share with you today that really can benefit you. That's great.
Yeah. Awesome.
I know I use the heartbeat one all the time for myself because it's something that's nobody knows what I'm doing. They're just noticing that I've got my hand on my heart, and nobody really says, what are you doing? They just see me there, and they notice I'm, doing this thing, and it's like they look at you and then look away because it's not such an obvious thing as if I was sitting closing my eyes and doing a meditation or something. It's something that's very innocuous that people don't notice, that it really helps me out, and I can do it anywhere. So.
It's funny you brought that up, Carol, because when I testified, I was testifying as an expert witness in a trial, human trafficking trial at the beginning of the year, and I actually used that technique in addition to one other technique with my hands underneath the desk with my hands open. And believe it or not, I did an amazing job testifying because the stress was gone. So definitely these techniques work.
And Anthony, you want to tell everybody about the technique with your hand underneath the desk, or tell what that one is?
Oh, yeah. So with your hands basically on your lap. So I was on the stand, so they couldn't see my hands. And I had my palms open with my hands facing up. And so it's just in a position where I was relaxed and feeling with my hands open and my palms facing up. It helped me relax more. And then, of course, I did this breathing exercise that Carol just covered as well when I first went on stand. And then as I was testifying, I did this other technique, and it did an amazing job for me. I was not stressed at all whatsoever. And as you all know, it can be stressful during cross-examination, so it really helps.
Great. Well, thank you all for your answers to the poll. It's wonderful. So any questions? Here's our contact information. We'll leave that up there while we answer any questions that you might have. So I see, where can we go to find the resources and tools? Those will be on the website, and it's right up here. It's www.shiftwellness.org. You can go to that website and find all sorts of resources and tools that are available. And anybody have any other questions for today? I know Beth has been very helpful in answering questions along the way, but if you've got any other questions that didn't get answered, please let us know.
Sometimes, this is Beth, sometimes one of the tools I use is I will just put my hands on my desk if I just need to take a break and center, because then I can feel the desk under my palms, and then it sort of brings me to the present moment. Does the desk feel smooth, or is my hand on contact with something that feels rough? Is it cool? Is it warm? It just really helps me center.
And Beth, I've used that as well, and it really is amazing how just bringing all of your attention to one thing in the moment can help to get rid of all of the other things going on in your head. So again, I think it's about doing the breathing, which gets the oxygen to your brain, and then having one single pointed thing to focus on. And something like that technique, or the one that Anthony was talking about, are so great because it's a very solid, easy thing to do. It doesn't take much effort, but it's really quick response.
Yeah. I see we have a question here, Carol. They're asking, do these tools work? Can they work with racial trauma?
I haven't ever spoken to anyone specifically about racial trauma, but I would believe that any kind of trauma that people experience, bringing yourself back into the moment so that you are in charge, the logical side of your brain is in charge, would be beneficial. So anytime that you're in fight, flight, or freeze, the logical part of your brain shuts down and the reptilian fight, flight, freeze brain takes over, which doesn't allow you to make good choices or decisions or even think clearly. So my my instinct is to tell you that anytime we can bring you back to the present moment where you can use your brain to think about the situation, all of these techniques would be helpful.
Right. Thank you, Carol.
Absolutely. Did you have anything, Beth, is there something that you can think of that I might have missed on that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's really about also assessing safety, right? Like you want to, you don't want to be trying to, if you are not in a safe place, you definitely don't want to be trying grounding tools while, or centering yourself necessarily while you're in imminent danger. So obviously assessing your own personal safety and then taking precautions there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, that didn't even occur to me, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely. First, safety first, and then once you can get to a safe place, use the tools to bring yourself back to your body and your brain, and then make some decisions from there. And then, again, breathing and these things will bring you, a lot of the behavioral things tools we talked about are things that will bring you back in to your body and your brain, so then you can think more clearly to make decisions. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. Anthony, do you have anything else that we missed to add that I didn't think about?
No, I think we covered it. Again, if you folks have any questions at all, the Innocent Justice website is a great place to go. A lot of great information there. And as Carol mentioned, the apps, I really like the apps. I know my daughter has started a sleeping app because sleep is really important to her at 18. So she loves that, and it helps her with the stress of school and everything. So those apps are great. So, but you guys, everybody's right on. I mean, all the responses we saw, it was great having this group, and I feel good. But please take care of yourselves, and then take care of each other. Definitely connect and communicate with each other when you're having some issues, and please watch out for each other. I mean, things are definitely not any easier in today's current climate, so please just watch out for each other.
And I see we do have one more question that says, I find myself extra stressed because I don't get to stay home during this time. So is there any reframing I can do? So I have been, unfortunately, unfortunately, Anthony's group has not been able to go to work, and I work doing street outreach as well as with Anthony's team. So I've never been stay for home. I've been partial days where I stayed from home, but for the most part, I was in the office every single day, and I understand that. So there's the stress because you don't get to stay at home, and that's on multiple levels. So am I stressed because I'm having to go into work and there's a greater potential that I might get exposed? Am I stressed because while I'm at work, I'm wondering what I can do with my children? Am I stressed because I might bring something home to my family? There's multiple layers of added stress that can happen if you are one of the individuals who doesn't get to take any time to work from home. So what I have done to alleviate some of that stress is I make sure that I'm doing everything in my power to make myself as safe. So that means I'm making sure that even if other people in the office aren't wearing a mask, I'm wearing a mask. Every time I come into my office, I wipe everything down. So I'm doing every single thing that I can to keep myself feeling as safe as I possibly can, because then I realize there's nothing else I can do. So when I get home from work, before I walk in the door, I sanitize my hands, I take my clothes off and take a shower first thing. So I think that if you know you are doing every single thing you can, then you're doing, you really are doing what you can. So that's how I am helping myself to not be so stressed about that, because there's nothing else I can do. I can't quit my job, but I can take every precaution that I can, and I've been doing it since the middle of March and going into work, and I've taken lots of precautions, and no one, I have not gotten sick, and no one that in my environment has gotten sick. So I'm hoping that it's related to the activities that I'm doing. more so than just luck. But I think that you can, if you have eliminated every possible thing that you can do, then that's all you can do. So I think about that before I go into the office. I try to center myself. Before I come home, I try to center myself by doing the grounding techniques or breathing or those things. But I make a practice of doing that because I know there's not a lot else I can do. So I'm in a situation where I've got to do the best I can given the circumstances. I hope that answers it.
One of the things I keep reminding myself, and I find myself writing it several times a day, is this concept of rest, don't quit. So that's kind of a mantra that I use when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's like, find time to just take a little bit of a rest, don't quit, because everybody's doing such important work.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I guess, William, we can turn it over to you if there's no more questions.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like the questions are indeed wrapping up here, and I'll take us to the very end here and close us out. Again, a wonderful and great presentation by our presenters, Anthony and Beth, and of course, Carol. Thank you so much for your moderation for today's webinar. I know I will personally be using a lot of these great tips that you all have provided. So thank you again for a great presentation, and thank you to our audience for attending today. Before we wrap up, just a couple of quick last-minute announcements for everyone. Please remember that if you want to get in contact with the OJJDP NTTAC Center, you can do so by clicking the link here. You can also subscribe to our listserv, our NTTAC listserv, where you can get information and updates about upcoming webinars like this in the future. You can also click on the links here or even text NTTAC to 22828 in order to sign up for the listserv as well. You can find us on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. If you're looking to get in contact with OJJDP, you can do so through the OJJDP TTA Help Desk through the phone number and email address that you see here. You can also reach out or find more information about OJJDP through the website here, and feel free to sign up for the listserv for them as well to receive more information about upcoming webinars and web events. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, please be sure to submit a request via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. You may do so by going to the website here to submit your request for training and technical assistance. Just as a reminder to folks that we are indeed recording this webinar, and it will be posted on our YouTube page, and you can get supporting transcript and materials by contacting the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. Please take a moment to review the attribution and the disclaimer here. And join us for some upcoming events. We have a couple of events coming up, one with our colleagues at Zero Abuse coming up tomorrow. Please note this webinar is for prosecutors only. We also have another webinar with our colleagues at the Innocent Justice Foundation that is a continuation of this specific webinar that's coming up on April 26th in a couple of days here. So please be sure to click to learn more, even register for these webinars. We also have 2 additional webinars for prosecutors only that are coming up on both the 3rd of September and also September the 16th. You can click to register for both of those webinars as well. And last thing here in the last minute that we have, I do have one last poll question for our audience that's remaining. Please let us know, how do you plan to apply the information from this webinar to your work? Please note that this is multiple select, so you can click on multiple answers here. But just give us the idea of how do you plan to apply the information from this webinar to your work. Again, thank you all to our audience and to everyone who's joined us for today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye.
The host has left the meeting. So at this time, the meeting will come to an end. Thank you and goodbye.